Everyone, I hope you're all doing well. My name is Eric Basta, Business Development Manager for NHMEP, New Hampshire Manufacturing Extension Partnership. So thank you very much for attending today's webinar, CMMC Rule and Compliance, What You Need to Know. Just to let you know, this session is being recorded. The recording will be made available to you at some point after the webinar. I will send it out in a link. And during the webinar, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A found on your screen, and they'll be answered at the end of the presentation. For those of you not familiar with NHMEP and CONNSTEP, both of our organizations belong to the National MEP system under the Department of Commerce and NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. There's an MEP center in all 50 states in Puerto Rico, and our mission is simple. We help manufacturers improve their productivity, compete globally, and keep jobs in the state. So let's get right into it. After years of development, CMMC is here. NHMEP, in partnership with CONNSTEP, the Connecticut Manufacturing Extension Partnership Regional Authority, will review the newly released Cybersecurity Maturity Model and Certification, also known as CMMC, and the certification requirements that will affect all DoD contractors and subcontractors. So now let me introduce you to our presenter, Anna Mumford. Anna is a cybersecurity consultant for CONNSTEP, the Connecticut Manufacturing Extension Partnership. And now we're going to hear from Anna. Take it away.
Thank you, Eric. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Let me just start with telling you a little bit about myself. My name is Anna Mumford. I am the cybersecurity consultant here at CONNSTEP. CONNSTEP, as Eric mentioned, is the Connecticut MEP Center. For the past 5 years, I have been working with small and medium-sized manufacturers in Connecticut, assisting them with regulatory cybersecurity compliance assessments. I usually work with the company's leadership team as well as their IT resources, whether they're internal or external, to guide the company's cybersecurity compliance implementation initiatives. I'm also a certified CMMC Registered Practitioner, CCP, and currently I am working on the next CMMC certification, which is the CMMC Certified Assessor. And a fun fact about me, just about a year ago, I graduated with my master's degree in Cybersecurity Management from Purdue University. So we have a lot of information to share with you today, and we will start with the threat landscape and why the DoD makes the implementation of the CMMC within their supply chain a priority. We will review the current DFARS regulations, the CMMC program in its purpose, who needs to be compliant and at what level. We will discuss what is in the new CMMC rule, the timelines and what needs to be done and by when, and as well as the impact this will have on all DoD contractors. We will talk about the requirements and what to expect, and we also will provide some additional information about resources, available funds, and implementation training. We will, as Eric mentioned, please keep all your questions, or actually put them in the Q&A sections, and I'm going to try to leave about 5 to 10 minutes at the end to answer them. So let's jump in. Excuse me, but before we start, I do need to let you know that nothing in this presentation is a legal advice or should be construed as endorsement of any solution, product, service, or methodology. We will be providing you with high-level information on the requirements, but please always refer to the authoritative documents and regulations. Okay. So let's start with the cybersecurity threat landscape. In 2022, the manufacturing sector became the #1 target for cyber attacks, accounting for nearly 25% of all cyber attacks across all industries worldwide. And this is mainly due to the manufacturers' increasing reliance on interconnected industrial systems, smart technologies, and adoption of digital transformation. So as the attack vector expands, cybersecurity becomes even more vitally important. At the same time, many companies ignore cybersecurity altogether, thinking they are just too small to warrant an attack. Many have legacy industrial systems where updating is not available, or replacing the system is simply just too expensive. So often they depend on aging infrastructure that runs on unsecure operational technology. According to the Bureau of Industry and Security, about 99% of all manufacturers in the US are small and medium-sized businesses. And yet about 50% of those lack basic security controls. And that means that the safety of our country is at risk. Think of industries like critical infrastructure, automotive and food industries, fuel and medical sector, just to name a few. Let's talk about the US defense industrial base, the DIB sector. This consists of about 300,000 subcontractors supporting the US military, where many of those handle sensitive DoD information, which means that about 99% of all DoD designs, makes, and uses come from small and medium-sized manufacturers, where the majority are widely unprotected and lack basic security safeguards. And as you can see, this represents a threat to the security of our nation, where other adversarial nation states diminish the US military capabilities and the ability of our country to defend itself. And they exploit that for geopolitical impact and economic gain that is reshaping the balance of power in today's world. Can you tell which of those two is the USB2 spirit and which one is the Chinese Communist Party's H20? It's very difficult to tell them apart, isn't it? So the US manufacturer is bleeding critical information, and the fact that they look so similar did not happen by accident. As you can see in this example, other adversarial nation states or state nations develop counter-weapon systems and capabilities for pennies and dollar. They field test and improve on those counter-weapon systems for the advantage it will gain them in the next great conflicts with the US. And therefore, they understand the weaknesses of the current US systems and their capabilities. So as an example, it took the US over 33 years and $203 billion to develop the B-21 radar. China exploited the US defense supply chain, captured the information, the critical DoD information, and reproduced their version of the aircraft in just 15 years, before even the original US version was operational. Yeah, that's the problem. So in attempts to protect the security of our country and its industries, the federal government have been implementing a series of cybersecurity regulations for the DoD, subcontractors. It is to protect the control and classified DoD information in all tiers of their supply chain. Those are the DFARS regulations, the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement, and the upcoming CMMC requirements, where the contractors and subcontractors are responsible for the protection of the sensitive DoD information. It is right now, and it has been really, the top priority for the DoD. And no company will be eligible for contract that do not meet those requirements. So let's talk about this information that we're required to protect, which is the FCI and CUI. So how can a company discover whether they handle federal contract information or CUI, the control unclassified information? So FCI is information relative to the performance of a government contract where there is an expectation of confidentiality of any information that is not lawfully available for release to the public. So for example, FCI include proposal responses, email exchanges with the DoD or defense contractor, contract performance information, process documentation, past performance information, financial reports, things like that. So when it comes to CUI, there is simply no simple definition. It's CUI, it's the government-wide initiative across all the government branches and departments to identify information that requires safeguarding and includes wide range of information for the DoD sector, such as the Covered Defense Information, CDI, which is any unclassified information that is provided to the contractor by or on behalf of DoD in connection with the performance of the contract, or it is collected, developed, received, transmitted, used, or stored by or on behalf of the contractor in support of the performance of the contract. And it is also information that falls in any of the following categories: control technical information, critical information, export control information, and any other information that is marked or otherwise identified in the contract that requires safeguarding. For many of our clients, it is also ITAR information, so there might be some overlap in that as well. So please note that a subcontract may receive this information as well as develop or collect them themselves. So the rule of thumb is that if the information meets the definition within the CUI registry, it is considered CUI, whether it is marked or it is unmarked. So contractor need to identify and determine what type of information your company receives or develops that qualifies as CUI. For that, you can go to the National Archive website. The link to it is on your slide. To become familiar with the various CUI categories. And so there's also a DoD version of that site as well, which you also have a link in here. And excuse me, if you go to those websites, you will find a list of CUI categories where you can find the definitions, examples. You can also find guidelines on marking of that CUI. So here are some, here are just really some examples of CUI to kind of help you think through it. That CUI may be detailed design drawings, blueprints, and schematics, bills of material, part number, unique to the military space applications such as vehicle weapon systems and defense-related equipment, manufacturing processes, the methodologies and process involved in it, material specifications that are unique to the military application, testing procedures and quality control data, software code, the source code, operational manuals, which is the technical manuals detailing the operation, installation, and maintenance. So those are just some examples. Again, just kind of go through this list and think in terms of what you may have or be, receiving or handling or developing within your organization. So let's jump into the DoD requirements, the regulation themselves. And so here I am identifying for you the FCI and CUI regulations. Both are codified in the FCR, the Code of Federal Regulations. For FCI, we have the Part 48 of the Code of Federal Regulations. For CUI, is Part 32. So the reason I'm really displaying this slide is so you can actually, let me click further, there's more to it, for you to be familiar with those regulations. If you find the FAR 52.204-21, it may appear in your contracts. Please review your contract. This refers about safeguarding the federal contract information. Then we have the Part 202. Actually, it's the DODI, the instructions 5200.48, which defines the CUI program. But really, look for also specifically for the DFARS clause 252.204-7012, 7019, and 7020, which describes there should be in your contracts, or some of them may be in your contracts currently. And I will talk in more detail about those. And then we have the DFARS 7012 that is specifically describes or calls for CMMC. And I'll talk more about that as well. Also in here, I want you to understand that we have the DFARS or DoD regulations, and then we have the cybersecurity framework, which is the frameworks have been developed by NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technologies, which are an agency under the Commerce Department. And the NIST 171 framework itself with 110 controls have been developed based on the NIST cybersecurity framework. Yeah, let me just jump into, I think that's it on the slide. Let me jump into more details about that. So the current regulations. First is the DFARS clause, the 204/7012, or we simply call it the DFARS 712, which applies to anyone working under a DoD contract. The prime contractors, subcontractors, all the way down to the lowest tiers. Excuse me. The key objectives are to safeguard, control, unclassified DoD information that reside in the contractor's internal information systems, to report the security and any security incident to the DoD, and flow the same requirements down to their own subcontractors. To comply with the requirements, all of the subcontractors were supposed to adapt the NIST 171 framework and do a self-assessment on the 110 controls, and they were supposed to do that by December of 2017. Unfortunately, very few organizations really did anything, and the DoD was very aware of that. Therefore, there was, because of the wide non-compliance, they came out, or they issued additional interim rules, which is the DFARS 7019, which requires the contractors to perform self-assessment against the NIST 171 framework and enter the result of the assessment or the score into the SPRS database, the Supplier Performance Risk System. The DFARS 7020 spoke about the DoD performing audits of the scores the company entered into the SPRS database. And yes, they have been doing audits or auditing the contractor's compliance and finding lots of overinflated scores and misrepresentations. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. So before we jump into further, for those of you that may not be familiar with the DCMA scoring methodologies, so if you have, so each of the 110 controls have a different point value based on the criticality. So if you start with 110 points and then subtract either 1, 3, or 5 for each of the 110 controls, you're going to end up with negative 203. So the range goes from negative 203 to 110 points. So if somebody has a score of 0, this is actually a pretty good score, or they moving along the way to a full compliance. So just so you understand the scoring. So as I mentioned, the DIPCAC has begun conducting medium confidence assessments on the small, medium-sized manufacturers, which they call a 5-day notice, because they give a 5-day notice and then come on site and do their audits of their compliance. So this chart in here, it's actually from the DCMA's slide deck directly, and it shows, maybe it's a little fuzzy, but you can see the blue columns in here is the score that has been reported by the contractor, and right next to it, the orange column is the score that has been that was a result of the DIPCAC assessment. So as you can see, there's a lot of overinflated scores and misrepresentations in here. So because of that, the DoD has been prosecuting intentional misrepresentations or negligence through the civil cyber fraud initiatives within the DOJ. Currently, there's about 6,000 companies that are on a waiting list to be prosecuted. So there are two key reasons for overinflation that have been reported by the DIPCAC. The first one is that the companies do not understand the requirements, the depth and the breadth of the requirements of the controls, and they are failing to provide documentation or evidence of their compliance. Excuse me. So if you if any of your if your company went through perhaps ISO or AS9100 certification, as you know, those are very heavy on policies, procedures, documentations, and things like that. Think about it in those same terms in here. If it's not documented, it's not compliant, whether you implement it or not. Kind of the same ideas in here. So I also want to kind of say a few words on the NIST cybersecurity framework itself. So on this slide, we have a representation of the updated NIST cybersecurity framework, the 2.0 framework, which shows the 5 steps that were in the original framework, which guide all additional frameworks that are out there, including the NIST special publication 800-171. And those are identified, this and of your critical assets, protect through implementation security protections, detect through risk assessment or monitoring, respond, and recover. In the updated 2.0 framework, they have added a 6th function, which implies it's really implied in the previous version, but it is critical step for all organizations, which is governance or oversight. So it requires all of your organizations to establish a government or oversight over your cybersecurity program, have an overarching strategy for risk management, policy and procedures, defined responsibilities or authorities within your organization, supply chain, and vendor risk management. So you cannot outsource this responsibility to your external IT managed service provider or any other vendor. It has to stay within you, within your organization. You need to have that responsibility internally. Let's jump into the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, the CMMC 2.0 rule. So in June of 2019, the CMMC program was first announced. And the objective of the program was to provide the DoD with a compliance verification mechanisms. So if you remember when they first came up with the 7012 rule or the requirements, it was more of like a pinky swear. There was no verification. There was just kind of, they were taking the organizations or the contractors and their word that actually they have performed self-assessment. They took one further step with the SPRS score and entering the score into that system. Now this is a next level. This is actually where they're going to do a full verification to see or prove that the contractor actually have implemented all of the controls, are performing them, and have the maturity, okay? So we are moving away from the self-attestation security model. So as you can see, the CMMC program was created over many years and stages. And we had a version 1.0, now we are version 2.0, from 5 levels, went down to 3 levels. In 2022, the program has been going through a rigorous process of being vetted on the government side. And the final rule was just published in October of last year, 2024, and took effect on December 16th of 2024. And actually the first assessments, certification assessment started being performed on January 4th of this year. So let me just say that the CMMC took some time to create, but it has a great level of sophistication and maturity. It is a complete, robust, and well-written policy that will improve the clarity and consistency regarding the requirements, and it provides the necessary detail for implementation across the whole ecosystem. So the CMMC implementation is through the DFARS 7021, as I mentioned, and it implements the CMMC at an appropriate level. So let's start with who will it affect. So it will apply to any subcontractor working under a DoD contract in all tiers of their supply chain, from the prime contractors all the way down to the lowest tier. The CMMC compliance level will be specified in the DoD request for proposal solicitation, and it will depend on the type of information the contractor will handle, whether it is FCI, Federal Contract Information, or CUI, Control Unclassified Information. Just to ensure we are all on the same page, let's look quickly, just review those three levels. So we have a CMMC 2.0. It's a three-tier model with three progressively sophisticated advanced levels depending on the type and the priority of the information the supplier will be handling. So level 1 is a foundational, applies to any organization that handles FCI, Federal Contract Information, and the requirement is to implement the 17 control safeguards from the NIST 171. Level 2 is advanced. It applies to any contractor that received CUI by on behalf of the DoD or collects, develops, transmits, stores CUI in support of the performance of the contracts, as we mentioned before. So the contractors are required to protect CUI through implementation of the DFAR 7012, the first original controls that we talked about it. So again, very quickly, as a reminder, those requirements are to implement the NIST 171 framework, report incidents to the DoD, security incidents, and then flow the same requirements to their own subcontractors if the identity of CUI, of the sharing with their subcontractors, the flowing CUI or the identity of the CUI, it's still retained as they passing the information to them. And then CMMC level 3, it's expert. It will be for the highest priority of CUI, and it will really be applicable to maybe a 1% of all of the contractors, mostly just primes. And the level 3 will include CMMC level 2 certification, as well as there is additional 24 practices from the NIST 172 that will be verified or audited by the DoD themselves. So until now, all of the contractors were supposed to do self-assessment and enter the score into their SPRS database. So for CMMC level 2, still the self-assessment will be required with reporting the results into the SPRS database by the company officials. Now, the company officials will also have to affirm the assessment score is accurate by reporting to it, to the SPRS. And then, but moving forward, there's going to be, and I'll talk about the time frame about it, we're going to have a third-party certification that's going to start becoming required in the request for proposals, okay? Again, this is going to be very similar to your ISO audit. And those certification will verify verifies effective and complete implementation of the prescribed secure controls. And those will be performed by a C3PO organization, which is the accredited CMMC third-party assessment organization, which are authorized by the DoD to perform those assessments. An assessor will use the assessment methodologies that are outlined in the NIST Special Publication 171A, the Assessor Guide, and the CMMC assessment methodologies under the DFAR 7019, 20, and 21 to examine, interview, and test if the secure controls are implemented correctly, they are operating as intended, and producing the desired outcomes. So just keep in mind that when it comes to the information systems and the organization as a whole, all of the controls encompass operational, managerial, and technical practices. So it's not all about IT. There's so much more to it. So the DoD program manager will select the CMMC level as a for a particular procurement or contract based on the type of information that will be processed or transmitted on the contractor's internal information systems. The contractor will need to achieve that particular CMMC level as a condition of the contract award. So it will have to show a proof of the certification or that meeting that condition. So think in terms of, what is at stake in here, what are the contracts and the value of the contracts that you may have. So it is important to understand, how to implement the CMMC and gain that certification, because when it is the contract starting showing up, and if you do not have the certification, you simply will not be able to participate in it any longer. So very quickly, level 1 requires implementation of all the 17 controls, and there is no partial implementation. It's all either met, compliant, or not met. So it's either yes or no. And you still, once you are compliant with all of the 17 controls, you are required to report, do a self-assessment and report that compliance into the SPRS databases. For those of you who are familiar with the SPRS database, they just, I believe in January or somewhere around this time, they just added the CMMC level 1 tab in the database where you can go and report those scores. That's a new in the SPRS. For level 2, so level 2 must, during the assessment, for the certification assessment, you must meet at minimum 80% compliance with the 110 controls to receive a conditional compliance status. So again, for this will be initially, we're going to have a self-assessment that will be required. You're going to have to report the scores into the SPRS, but when the CMMC certification is going to start coming out as a requirement of the contract, and you do get the conditional compliance status at the C3PO certification assessment, you will then need to close all of the open items on your POEM with the assessor within 180 days to receive a full certification. And then for level 3, as I mentioned, its requirement is a full level 2 certification, and then kind of review or assessment by a DoD of the additional 24 practices from NIST 172. So let's talk briefly about the POEM, the plan of action and milestone, and what closing out a POEM open item means. So think of POEM as a to-do list, where you put any open items are the controls that still need to be compliant or are deficient. Some of the 110 controls allowed to be left open on your POEM during the assessment, but those only need to be, or they allow only a 1-point value or low criticality practices or controls on your POEM. And you still have to meet the minimum of 80%. There cannot be any 3-point or 5-point controls open on your POEM, okay? And again, as I mentioned, then after that, you get 180 days to finish or complete those open items on your POEM and kind of recertified with the assessor to gain a full certification. If you do not do that within 180 days, the conditional certification will simply expire and you're going to have to start from beginning. Also, the CMMC rule now states that external systems are now subject to compliance. So if you have external systems that your company uses, such as cloud, through cloud service providers, the cloud service providers will need to be FedRAMP certified themselves. And if you are using a third party or IT managed service provider, or actually any other external service provider that has access to your CUI or process store or transmit CUI, that organization is going to have to be either themselves CMMC level 2 certified, or they're going to have to be pulled into your own certification assessment, and you're going to be inheriting their compliance. So just keep this in mind. Those are actually super important. Also, I want to kind of walk you very briefly through, this is the ecosystem. So the authorities for all of this is obviously the DoD. The DoD is the owner of the CMMC model and the regulations. but they have they are using Cyber AB organization, and they have empowered that organization to really for the implementation of the CMMC program, honestly. So we have an organizations and individuals under the Cyber AB organizations, and I just want to point it out that the C3PAO organizations are the ones that are authorized by the DoD to perform those certifications, the audit certification audits. And you can find a list of those under Cyber AB Marketplace website. They're all listed over there. Them themselves went through a very, very rigorous process to begin the status of be able to do the assessments, and they do have very strict procedures that they need to follow during the assessment, and they will be reporting the assessment results to the DoD. Now, when it comes to individuals, we have RP registered practitioners that went through some type of online training, but then we have a CCP and CCAs, which is again a steep road for our individuals to get there. The CCP is the CMMC certified professionals. Those individuals will be doing the assessment. The CCPs and CCAs will be doing assessment and for your organizations. Those individuals with those certification that work for a C3PO organizations will be actually the ones that is going to be doing your assessment, as I mentioned. So CCP is going to be assessing level 1 controls. CCA is going to be assessing CMMC level 2 controls. So I hope this kind of brings a little bit more clarity to the process itself. Now let's talk about the implementation. So it will be done in 4 phases. Phase 1 will start at effective date, which at this point we're looking at initially was end of March, but now I'm hearing more of a May timeframe of this year. So, and I know that a lot of our clients, customers are asking, will you be CMMC level 1 compliant? So in this phase, the DoD solicitation will start including self-assessment for level 1, and some maybe level 2 solicitation will start as well, but it's really meant for implementing CMMC level 1. Phase 2 will begin 12 months later, so we're looking at perhaps late spring of 2026. At this point, CMMC level 2 will require certifications, although some of the solicitation may specify certification due at what they call other option period, which means that they may specify a later date by which the organization will need to be fully certified. And then again, at this point, some of the CMMC level 3 requirements may start coming out. Then we have phase 3, which will start 12 months later or 24 months after the effective date. At this point, all solicitation will require full certification for all 3 levels, for all new and existing contracts. Although some of the solicitation with the CMMC level 3 requirements may still have the option period or the later date. And then finally, phase 4 will start again 12 months later or 36 months after the effective date, and it will include it really will include the applicable CMMC level in all of the solicitations. So contractors will be required to present proof of the compliance at a specified level as a condition of contract award. And again, if the prime contractor is flowing down or any contractor is flowing down the or sharing CUI, they need to flow down the same rule and require a proof of compliance. So let's talk very briefly about scoping. This is unfortunately missed so many times, and it is a critical step in implementing or preparing for CMMC. So the scoping, it's really determining the boundaries of what is in scope for a CMMC assessment, or identifying all of those or every assets the contractor needs to protect. Okay, and that ensures that we don't waste resources building up security and systems that really don't need it, right? So scoping also helps organizations to optimize how they might redesign their systems and business processes to limit the scope when possible, and therefore limiting the implementation costs, effectively focusing on the allocation of resources, and improving security by reducing the attack surface. And of course, scoping benefits the contractors and it's overall streamlines their journey towards achieving the CMMC compliance. So all the scoping documentation will, when you engage with C3P organizations, they will definitely be asking you first and analyzing all of the scoping documentation that will give them understanding of what is required, what they're going to be doing. Now, there are two documents, the CMMC assessment scope level 1 and level 2, and you have linked to those as well, and they will be providing you with more details and information on how to really go about to the scoping process and what is required. Now, there are 5 asset categories for the CMMC level 2 assessment scope. It identifies 5 categories to kind of keep in mind. So we need to, all of those assets that you have identified, we need to identify which of those assets are controlled unclassified information assets, which are assets that store, process, or transmit CUI. Then you may have a secure protection asset. So those are assets that provide security functions or capabilities for your organizations. Whether they do store, process, or transmit CUI or not, if they provide protections, those assets will fall within that category. So just keep in mind that many of the times your external vendor might be falling within this category. Their assets might be falling within these categories, right? Then we have contractor risk managed assets. So those are assets that can but are not intended to process or transmit CUI because of security policy procedures. So so again, those are assets that are not directly involved in CUI, but there is no separation those assets from your network, physical security, whatever that may be. We still need to list them in your asset inventory, network diagram, and things like that. But then we just qualify, we kind of assessing the security for those assets and making sure that we have some type of protections around them, but they will not be assessed against all of the CMMC requirements. Then we have specialized assets that are assets that can process, store, transmit CUI, but are not able, the technology is not able to fully implement all of the 110 controls. So when you identify those, and then we have out of scope assets, and those are assets that they need to be fully separated, either physically or logically separated from your CUI assets. So please, I would refer you to the those documents I just mentioned earlier, and just go into more details because those go into more details about it. So yes, the CMMC rule is here. It is complicated, but help is available. So for those of you who would like assistance, CONNSTEP will be hosting a CMMC Bootcamp training, which will be a 5 half-day sessions between May 13th and May 27th of this year, this spring. And in those sessions, it will be, those are going to be virtual sessions. And in those sessions, we will guide participants through all of the 110 secure control implementation, the evidence documentation. We'll provide some templates. We'll discuss how to customize, edit those templates. We will go through policies, discuss procedures, system secure plan, incident response plan. We'll discuss risk management procedures, scoping, documentation, development, and much, much more. So you can find the registration on CONNSTEP website. I know that this is available for Connecticut companies, but New Hampshire organizations are also welcome to participate in this program as well. So if you need, but also mention that if you do need immediate assistance, please feel free to reach out to either Eric or myself directly. Okay, and you're gonna find again my contact information and Eric's contact information in the last slide. So also I want to mention for the Connecticut organizations, manufacturers, there is cybersecurity assistance available. It is a state funding that is managed and administered by CCAT. For more information and detail, please refer to the website, the CCAT website. You'll find all of the information in there, or you can contact CONNSTEP and we will help you or kind of guide you through that. But you also have a link to their website on the slide. And